There have been additional unconfirmed sightings now over France, Korea, and here in the United States.
Someone or something has chosen to visit us. Officials have yet to speculate as to who these visitors might be.
Panik verbreitet sich in ganz Russland, das unter Kriegsrecht gestellt wurde.
They came from another solar system, for Pete's sake. We haven't even been to Mars.
중앙 러시아 상공에 괴물체 출현했다는 러시아 보고가 있습니다.
There's been absolutely no evidence that these phenomena are endangering anyone.
The LAPD is asking Los Angelenos not to fire their guns at the visitor spacecraft.
These are uncertain but exciting times. Be brave. Be strong.
There is no indication that we are in any danger. Let me stress that. There is no indication that we have to worry.
First of all, I think when you do a special effect movie these days, I think you should do something which, first of all, you have to go to the limits of what technology can do. Secondly, you have to create like 1 or 2 sequences that people haven't seen, where they're like totally amazed that this is possible now.
One of the things Roland has taught me from the first day I started working with him is it's not the tool, it's the craft. And we would approach every special effect shot on the simplest way to do it first, the tried and true, the simplest, easiest way. Only when that wouldn't work would you go up to the next level. And when that wouldn't work, you go to the next level. So our film does everything from the highest tech, digitally animated, digitally composite CGI shot to little models on wires in front of photo backings, and everything in between.
The first thing I felt like was the most necessary to do is actually think about the alien world, because that was the only thing that was completely new, actually. The alien world, there's nothing you can really potentially start from, and definitely not start from other people's work. You try to avoid that and not get stuck in somebody else's style. So usually when I do alien stuff, any alien material, I try to just start from scratch, let myself go.
Patrick kind of is a person who is very, very into organic forms. And I think that was his big contribution to this film, to kind of like keep in a way this like alien culture in an organic form, like believable, and doesn't become too alien to us. And he's very good at that.
We've done tons of designs, and Roland came and picked some that he liked. And the first thing was that's the one he liked for the mothership. He just really liked the look of it, felt like they had a great power to it. The size of the craft relate to the amount of alien coming, and basically all their world is moving together. That's why this thing had to be so big. The simpler the shape, the more massive the element looks like. And actually working through those designs, I started to really realize that actually the simple shape makes the thing look much more massive. And that's, at that point, our direction were toward that thing, thinking, okay, simple, elegant, and massive. The dome thing came very instinctively. We didn't really think about it, it looked elegant. You had those huge giant pods, which I think make this shape work together nicely. The pod is something we couldn't do on a destroyer, for example, that hovering the city, because the pod would allow to have the craft sitting close enough to the city. And so we had to get away without that on the destroyer. So we went actually kind of crazy on the mothership, having those huge, gigantic pods.
We wanted to tap into pre-existing mythology about UFOs. Because people somehow have an idea of what an alien might look like, or what a spaceship looks like, or what that, all these things would be. So what we try to do is show you that and then take it a step beyond it. Have it look familiar, and then as you see it closer, say it's one step farther. It's wilder than I had imagined.
The original concept for the attacker was to make this thing about 100 feet wide. The stage didn't allow us to do that. So we shrunk the craft to what we felt could be the maximum size it could have in there and still potentially fly off that set. But the attacker was actually 65 feet wide, which was like a potential full-size attacker. That's the way this thing was supposed to be. In a sense, makes it the smallest alien thing we see in the movie is actually the attacker, and still it's a pretty gigantic thing. I mean, 65 feet wide. Because this thing had to be a practical set as well, I mean, the attacker had to be practical. People were supposed to walk on it. People were supposed to stand into the cockpit, and we had to shoot inside the cockpit itself. Meant this whole thing had to be a very heavy structure in itself. It wasn't like a traditional set where you usually use wood and plywood and you had to put it together. In this case, it was just a full, metal structure for the craft.
After I read the script and we did a breakdown of the miniatures, there's like more miniatures in this movie than probably any two movies combined. It was overwhelming because there's cities to build, there's alien craft, alien creatures, just about everything you could do in miniatures. We have motion control. We have a model maker down there that runs the electronics and everything for the ship. And then on the other stage, 35, which is our pyro stage, we have two guys setting up for our LA street scene.
Pretty much every effect person we talked to said, be prepared for a $150,000 shot. And we said, well, why is it so difficult to do? And they said, well, because not only do you have to shoot the street and shoot all the elements of the street that happen, but you'll have to digitally create the fire that rolls down the street and then digitally composite that into your shot. And that's going to be very expensive to make that look real. And Roland said, well, why can't we just do that all in camera? And everyone said, well, it'll look fake, it'll never work. And Roland said, I think I could do that in camera. So Roland came up with this idea that we build the street on a large platform, make it 1/24 side, enormous buildings, then take the entire platform and stand it on its end.
Our miniature, it's 24 scale, it's about 8 feet wide, 20 feet long, and it's going to be a street where we're going to show the wave of destruction coming up the street.
Always fire also wants to go up, especially like when you do it in a miniature way. We wanted that the fire comes right at you, so the street had to become pretty much a chimney for the fire.
And it's hanging on a scaffolding at about a 10-degree angle. So when we have our destruction and our fire and everything start here, it will run up the street as it eats up the fuel. And our camera will be mounted about 5 feet off the set at the top. And I think in what we're doing, miniatures work best. I mean, there's a lot of explosions, a lot of pyro, a lot of fire, a lot of stuff that even today with the sophisticated computers is still tricky to do.
When you blow up a big model, there's nothing better than that. You can't create this like with CGI yet.
And action!
So like the bigger explosion stuff, all the fire elements are real fire elements. We composite them later like in the computer.
One of our showcase pieces is going to be the White House, and we're building that at 12 scale, which is over 14 feet wide, and we're going to blow it up.
I think the best White House model ever. We put a lot of thinking into that. We built it not like out of wood. We built it out of plaster. Everything was a mold, so every piece, was like kind of like created first in wood and then made a silicone mold out of it, and then little plaster pieces, and then it was built like the White House was built out of single pieces.
The White House has got such great detail in it that even in the most preliminary test that we've done, that the White House holds up in an extreme close-up. So all of a sudden this particular miniature is very near and dear to our hearts because it's got such wonderful detail. I don't know if I really want to blow it up or not.
With miniature pyrotechnics, there's a great many variables that go into the completion and the successful blowing of a model like this. One has to consider what the model is made out of, in this case plaster. You have to know the scale, you have to know the size of the charges that you're using, how much gas, what the camera speeds are. So there's a great variety of things that have to be considered when blowing up a model like this.
When the actual explosion takes place, it's over in a second. But we are doing this 300 frames per second thing instead of the normal 24, which means we're slowing it down 12 times. So the whole thing looks 12 times slower in the end.
And we blew the sucker up with 9 cameras shooting it at various speeds, and then we digitally composited that into our shot from Washington.
Hey! And action!
Well, there you go. It's everything that I expected it to be. And everything went off. We didn't have any problems with that. And this is what's left of it.
I think old-fashioned effects, will never die out because they're simply too good. We sometimes make a combination of like a model, motion control, photographed models for the foreground, and then like go like digital CGI in the background.
We have the model mounted on a 3-axis gimbal, which controls basically the ship's attitude in space, which way it's pointing. And then the actual forward, any motion is created by the camera, and that's all running under motion control off the computer here. The motion control system is basically a very sophisticated and high precision motion tape recorder, editor. You'll write a move for a spaceship, and once the move is done and approved by everybody, then you can play back that move with extreme precision as many times as you like. The computer graphics people need to know exactly, for them to have their computer environment move and have all the perspectives match up with the model that was shot photographically on stage. The computer graphics guy's computer has to know exactly how the camera on the stage moved. It has to be a very precise recreation of the motion that occurred on the stage. So the computer allows us to record all that motion, export it on a disk to the computer graphics people, and they can plug that in and use that to match up their background to our model foregrounds.
I did 2 concepts for the alien. I did one that was this tall alien fantasy, let's say, not the way people picture an alien to look like, a real alien. And the other direction was doing something more in the tradition of what people think an alien should look like, which is this little being with a bigger head because the brain is big and they're very clever people, bigger eyes. That was the 2 directions. And still giving it kind of a surrealistic look about, having just 2 fingers and maybe not being able to propel itself on the ground, just to make it a little bit more, less human, if I would say. Those 2 designs were on the wall, and Ron came upstairs and looked at it and decided, looked at it for a little while, he said, I love that, but I like this too. What am I going to do? And actually he did come up with the idea of using both alien.
Because on the one hand, I kind of wanted to kind of follow the mythology, which like people think, like aliens look, and there's a certain kind of image everybody's constantly drawing, and I wanted to stick with that. But on the other hand, I thought it's like terribly boring. So what we did, we kind of created first like an image of the alien which you think it's not like what you think they look like, to later then discover, in a surprise, that they exactly look like we think they should look like.
Technically speaking, the small alien is our real alien. The other one is actually another alien. It's a potential creature, living creature as well, that those small aliens use to travel through space. Those aliens live on a planet where other creatures live around. They take those big, dumb aliens, but very powerful, they treat them, have their face split open and just fit in there and travel space this way. So they actually become strong creatures, physically strong. They're actually very clever beings, but they need to be physically strong to travel space. So that's the full-size alien, that's the big alien, which is actually, as we know now, the suit. It's a quarter-scale replica of the full-size alien we've built for the show. What you do, you make an armature in there with the alien. It's all articulated. The joints are all articulated, and you put armatures on some of them, and then you have like rods coming out. You got about 4 or 5 guys moving every part of the creature around. Later on, they're going to be removing those rods out of the scene. It's like a blue screen technique, pretty much. What you can get, you can make this thing look like it's running full speed on a screen, and you get much more life to it. And still, at this date, I think CGI doesn't convince me as much as the rod control puppet do. So I think maybe in the future we'll be able to do that with CGI. So far, it hasn't been convincing enough, so we still try to do it that way. I use the guy in the suit for a lot of our scenes, where the guy actually, you see just the upper body of the creature with the arms. You really have a guy in there, plus mechanical hands, mechanical face, but you could potentially have someone. But then you show the legs on their own, then you cut with the body again. I guess that's at that point when the magic of editing and directing and those things all work together. You end up thinking that, how did they do that? So those legs have been built like the rest of the creature as separate elements, because sometimes I need some type of legs, sometimes I need another type of legs. I mean by that, some legs need to be articulated with armature wire in there, so I can put them in a specific position. But then the upper torso needs to be the hero one. Another time I need to have like just a mechanical leg like this that actually move up and down for different scenes. So what I wanted to do is being able to change not the full creature every time, and that's also for a budget reason, not to build like 50 creatures, maybe 3 of them with a different group of, members, like the arms, the legs separately. We got some pretty convincing shots of those legs coming in the shot. When you see the guy screaming in front of it, and suddenly you'll see those 2 legs jumping in frame. And those came out actually really good. Those are probably some of my favorite shots. This is a typical stunt arm we've used. The quality of the paint job is as good as the hero arms. The difference is only in the fact that those guys are positionable. You put the position you want before the scene, actually. And the actor splits his arm inside there. The actual hand of the actor reached that point. After that, it's all either, when I use mechanical arm, full mechanical arm with cable control, or in a case like this one, in the stunt one, just a wire armature to put this thing in a position I'd like to see it in. So this is the same concept on the other hand. It's actually painted exactly the same way, except it's our hero hand, which is the actor puts his arm inside that socket basically, and his finger ends up here. From that point on, I've got a mechanical hand with full of cable running all the way up to the outside, and all that stuff is done by puppeteers. So what the actor has to do is actually mostly moving his forearm, and the hand motion is done by puppeteers outside the scene actually. This is the way the creature looks actually when it's put together. So you see it all together right now in a closed position with the face closed. Abdomen, joint, and then you got pelvis and all the legs. The first time the alien appears in the movie, it looks like this, the face. As you see here, you got in the design of the creature a big split in line here that goes all the way up to the throat inside here. The doctor are trying to play with it, and at that point the thing opens. One head just opens, the other one, it's an open head already that the Alcon can walk in and start lifting the skins. That's another head. Then you got a third head for the revealing of the alien inside. Then you got a fourth head, which is a head where the small alien pops out. For example, when the alien is lying on this operating table and the face opens, for a process like that looks like, I'd say, 30 seconds in the movie, we had to build 4 heads just for that process. This alien you're seeing here inside the head of the big suit is actually the one we use for the coming out of the creature. This head was actually lying on an operating table. I had 2 puppeteers underneath this operating table, and basically push the alien from the inside out, have the arms coming out first, and that alien was built just for that specific scene. In the scene in the laboratory, the only reason this thing can actually walk around, and that's another reason why you can combine designs, is the lab was designed in such a way we have a lot of pipes on the ceiling which allow the creature to actually grab pipes and walk around holding itself. That's an interesting point of showing how we can actually work out the sets at the same time you work the creature, and everything is actually end up being the same kind of concept. He has to work really tightly together. So this is actually a final hero alien. That's the one that lives in the suit. That's the one that does all the motion. What you're seeing here is all the harness. One puppeteer was wearing the full harness to move the arms. Guys were working on the fingers from here, working on the head from there. So this is about a 7 puppeteer deal for just this guy. All the plates inside were moving. A lot of lights, different points in there, plates moving up and down. The arms are all mechanical, so they wrap back in, fingers moving forward, backward. This one got shot in the head twice for a hero shot when the guy gets killed. We were supposed to use a stunt one for that, but we ended up shooting so close that we wanted to show one moving and then dying slowly. This has been built just for an insert shot only of the eyelid of the creature opening when he wakes up inside the suit. And what Ron, the director, wanted to do is actually being able to see in the eyes the reflection of the actor. This could have been done as a post-production thing, as an insert, but actually Ron really wanted to use it on the set actually, because he could get the real reflection, didn't have to match up things on post, and there's so much post-production happening on this movie already, I don't think we want to add anything else. What you're seeing here is 2 of the remaining aliens that you actually see in the movie in the containers, in the tanks. Those are, in the story of the movie, the 3 aliens they found years ago, like the Roswell experiment story. We tried to make them look pretty trash from the beginning, so they looked like they went through a crash. The first approach was to do a dry tank, imitation of water. It did look okay, I'd say. Ron Emmerich looked at it and said, no way, we have to put water in there. Suddenly we had to change the thickness of the tank, get some new tanks overnight, put them up there, fill them up with water, and put those creatures in there. The water always helps to make them look bigger, distort them, and they look twice as realistic as they would look.
Digital effects. I think a real generic way of explaining it is most people consider anything that involves a computer. And there's really 2 distinct fields. One is compositing. The other aspect of computer work is CGI, computer-generated imagery. The difference between the two is compositing, again, you're putting the elements together, and CGI, you're actually generating elements. The same way if you were shooting an element, you're actually creating something that didn't exist before.
A wireframe is our representation of a solid object. And how you get there basically are points in space, and that can be done either by an animator taking a point in space and saying this is connecting the dots basically, and creating something that has a mass and has a solid volume to it. Once we've created the wireframe, then we have to have a certain point of view on that wireframe, and that changes for every shot. The beauty of the wireframe is once it's built, we can use it for any shot. You can put the F-18 flying straight towards you, and we in the computer have what's basically a virtual camera, and you can put the camera in the front of this 3D object and it looks like it's flying towards you. If you want to go to the side, you can move it to the side and you get the wings and you can show the rotation, and just off of the 3D object and this virtual camera that's used in computer graphics. Texture mapping is the next step. Once you've got your wireframe, which is your 3D representation to connect the dots, you then need to take a real surface and basically paint it over top of this texture.
Usually computer-generated images look synthetic. Therefore you want to get some dirt, some natural images in there. And the easiest thing is to actually take pictures of dust and dirt.
We photographed, like a real F-18 on a tarmac, and in every, down to every screw, and and texture mapped it on a wireframe. I think, we went a big step there. It looks really good.
On this show, we had several sets of challenges. One of the biggest ones was the dogfight scenes. We're animating hundreds of airplanes in the air at the same time. And to do that plane by plane is just a really painstaking process. It takes a really long time, because you have to do not only each F-18 or each attacker, but then each attacker shoots the attacker firing, and each F-18 fires missiles and tracers, and there's hundreds and hundreds of objects to keep track of. And then even some of the objects that are like the F-18's missile fire, they emit fire and smoke as well, so you've got literally thousands of things to keep track of in the scene. Since we're doing this all with computers are really good at doing that, good at simulating all those things, so we've written programs which do nothing but simulate the dogfight scenes in a way that we have a lot of control over them.
You will see in this movie scenes where 150 F-18 American jets will be fighting over 250 alien attackers in the most spectacular aerial sequence ever filmed. Now, this wouldn't have been possible without digital technology, without computers.
The solution before we were brought onto the show was to hand animate all of this. So it's just as if you were to do it with motion control, do it with some traditional methods. You have to actually hand animate each F-18 or each attacker. And then they were doing things like copying some different paths and whatnot. But it was still basically a ton of hand animation. It would take several days to set up one shot and then render it, and then several days to do another shot. So we were able to take it from about a 4 or 5 day turnaround per dogfight and bring it down where we can basically produce 2 dogfights in one 24-hour period.
I've never seen CG, computer-generated imagery, come out as fast as on this show. I mean, we literally, Roland can call in and fax us over a storyboard at 9 o'clock at night and have an animatic and have animation by the next morning. And normally that would take a week to 2 weeks, on normal pace.
Because there's a limited amount of horsepower in the computer, even though these are really fast computers, we have to use primitives, or these little dots, to represent each of the airplanes at first. You can see it's only stepping a few frames per second. It's only stepping very slowly through the dogfight, and that's so we can tweak each of the individual parameters as it's stepping through. And I can go through and adjust sliders or grab my equations and make adjustments to my equations in real time and see how that affects the dogfight. And then as soon as I get the motion the way I want it, as soon as I get the numbers the way that we want it for a particular shot, then I can go in and substitute the real airplanes for these dots.
One shot alone, which is 21 CG planes, 2 motion control planes, and they're all firing 2 missiles except the president's plane, which is firing 1 missile. So all of that, and the shot just kept expanding and expanding. And eventually when we finally went to go back up the shot and get it laid off back to a backup format DST, we found out that the shot had totaled 52.5 gigabytes for that 1 6-second shot.
One of the beauties of compositing is that rather than trying to do everything in camera, trying to do everything live, where you would have to have a model, you'd have to have a spaceship to scale, you'd have to have pyro, and all of that happening at the same time, by compositing in layers, it allows us to choreograph each layer perfectly and then put them together.
What really helps the director and the filmmakers is that what it really is offering when everything is evaluated is flexibility. So if somebody's shooting model miniatures of an F-18, let's say, once that's shot, the lighting, everything as the way it was shot, you're locked into it. So that by the time you go to put that element together, way down the line, 6 months later, after you've shot it, and all of a sudden the director says, oh, guess what, I've changed my mind, this isn't a day scene, it's now a night scene, and you want to change lighting or you want to change the nuances of that element, it's extremely difficult because you're locked into certain parameters. Where with computer-generated imagery, you have control of the lighting, you have control of it just the way you would in a shooting environment, and that you always have control of changing those things based upon what the director now wants to do with it. So flexibility is really what digital has to offer the filmmakers.
When we build a composite in this particular software, we usually work from the back to the front. In this particular composite I have here, the very back element was the destroyer itself. Another element that we added to this composite was the CG, or computer graphic, beam and particles. And I took these two elements and added them on top of the destroyer before I added the White House. So this was like an intermediate layer. And we wanted to give the impression that this beam was coming down and striking the White House and exploding it. We have the destroyer in the background, which started out as a model. We have the lights, which were shot as a separate piece, and we've added those together. We have the beam coming down with the particles timed right, so it hits right. And then we had the nice edge here where the pyro comes up. It's nice and soft, and you pick up all the debris that's in the original element to give you a convincing composite that we're actually blowing up the White House.
The buildings that you're going to see in this particular shot are very, very small. They're about 3 feet tall, where the people are, real people, and they're shot real time. So we have to have a way to find, to put all those elements together, and the way to do it is digital compositing.
A lot of debris had to be put into the pyro elements because that's not in the explosion. The explosion is a clean explosion, and then we have to put in, as a separate element, things like glass shattering and plaster exploding, all of those things so that you could get physical debris, then need to be mixed into the pyro. Another thing were the large model miniatures that exploded. We had to composite into a lot of those shots, which are model miniatures with the pyro in it. The destroyer itself, the destruction beam, an atmospheric haze, people running towards camera, 3 or 4 layers of different cars, foreground, midground, background, anything that billboards, signs, flags, anything that we had shot as separate model pieces that needed to fly towards camera. One thing Roland really wanted to do was have large objects wipe frame that would help him transition from shot to shot in the destruction sequence.
We've shot over 6,000 elements to make up over 400 visual effect shots. Now, to give perspective on that, our last film, Stargate, which is thought of as a effects-heavy movie, had roughly 260 visual effect shots. So this is over 140 shots more. And in those shots, we had an average of about 3 elements per shot, and here we're averaging 10 to 15 elements per shot. So it's quite expansive as far as what we're doing, quite ambitious.